Well, welcome to Stepping into Shakespeare. We're here with actor Tim James. Welcome to our podcast, Tim.
Hello.
Hi, Tim. Great you
Hi.
have time for us. Nice to have you here.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your work in the play and also for your work with the audio. Can you talk a little bit about how you started as an actor?
I suppose my route was relatively conventional. I did sort of, music stuff and acting drama stuff at high school, and then went to Birmingham and did a joint honours degree in music and drama. So I sort of kept both avenues open, I suppose, even through my first degree. And then I did a 1-year postgrad acting course at a place called Drama Studio in London afterwards. So that was my, sort of early 20s. And then I sort of started, I sort of then spent a decade doing, bits and pieces. But actually, my very first professional engagement was Romeo and Juliet.
Oh wow! So Shakespeare,
at a theatre out in Wales, sort of little. Nice. Well, not that little. It was about 400-seat theatre out in Wales. So that was sort of my very first pro acting job.
And what role did you play in?
I was Romeo.
That's a big part for a first job, you know.
It was. But it was, you break it down into scenes, and you just sort of learn it scene by scene. And it was good fun. It was a very young cast. Lots of sort of new young people out doing it. So it was great.
So you have worked with Shakespeare for a long time then?
So, well, again, I suppose as with most things, if it comes along, you do it because, it can be a bit of a sort of, what's the word? It can be a bit precious. So sort of people are very, very precious about it sometimes. So, and you've got the big institutions like the RSC and things. And so, they have, obviously, the Judi Denchs and the Alan Rickmans and some wonderful, wonderful people. So, if you're lucky, you end up being sort of third spear bearer on the left if you're a young actor coming up. It's a double-edged sword, I think, doing Shakespeare. I was lucky, I suppose, with that sort of for my first sort of piece of acting work. Really,
that's brilliant. You just got thrown into it, and
And have you read any other plays of Shakespeare?
Yeah, I suppose you sort of get familiar with all the big ones. I remember doing an audition speech from Richard II when I first went to drama school and things like that. And at drama school, of course, you do a Shakespeare module, and I did Richard III. Okay. And then you just, in a sort of very actory kind of way, you read them, don't you? So
yes.
And you read the famous ones like Hamlet and Macbeth and things like that. And obviously, you go to the theatre and you watch them as well, and watch great actors doing Shakespeare on stage. And of course, we've had various film adaptations over the years. So I suppose it's one of those things. Once you sort of get your head round the writing style, which actually, you could say, if you look at something like Pinter or I don't know, Brecht or something, they all have a sort of a particular way of doing things. So they, some are easier than others to get in. Obviously, with Shakespeare, because of the distance time-wise, obviously the language has evolved a lot more since then. So there's a little bit of kind of, sort of getting familiar with how that language works, and then trying to make it make sense as a contemporary sort of, 21st century human being.
Was that something you enjoyed doing, that process of reading the language, getting familiar familiar with it.
Yeah, and I think sort of, there are various sort of approaches to it. And I think for me, again, I think because the training I had was we did a lot with the first folio was the sort of the Holy Grail, and we did a lot of cue script work. So basically, you literally just got your lines with your cue line, so you didn't get the whole scene or the whole script of the play.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the way apparently the original actors would have got their parts.
Oh, really?
Back in the day. So you didn't know when the other person's speech ended, how long it was going to be.
Wow.
So you just had to listen out for your cue line.
Oh my goodness.
And that is a really interesting way of working because it makes
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it makes you really attentive to what's going on stage, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden you could hear your cue line and you have to come in, with your
spring into action.
Yeah, with your next line. So that was quite an interesting sort of way of working.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And then of course taking, obviously Shakespeare wrote in prose and he wrote in poetry in the iambic pentameter. And that's also interesting in terms of, what characters are speaking in prose, when are they speaking in iambic pentameter. Sometimes they swap round. So that can make you sort of go, okay, if something's a little sort of higher level emotionally or a bit more fraught or just grander in terms of status, then you're more likely to be in iambic pentameter and be very solid. But also within that, there's the sort of the standard da-dum 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 da-dum, nice kind of even rhythm. Well, of course, obviously not all the iambic pentameter is in that rhythm, and it sort of breaks down. And again, the more sort of, I suppose, distressed or worried or again emotionally sort of heightened a character is getting, you tend to see the iambic sort of the rhythm start moving around and it gets broken down. So you don't necessarily you obviously don't say the lines in to a beat, you're not rapping. But it can give you those, it can help give you those indicators of sort of what's happening to your character sort of emotionally or intellectually. And you tend to find those sort of, if you've got those very witty rapid fire sort of like in Much Ado About Nothing and things like that, then the iambic pentameter is very solid because they're very they're sort of jousting with words. When you then get to the other extreme and you've got Lady Macbeth and falling apart, then the iambic gets very sort of broken and you get half lines and things. So it's again, it's sort of and a bit like the cue scripts. So because you'd have, again, apparently historically very short notice as an actor when you're getting the scripts, or again you might do 3 or 4 different plays in a week, so you've got to relearn the lines very quickly. All of that is giving you clues as to, okay, how am I going to play this line? And if it's nice and even, then you're probably being a little bit more a little bit more intellectual, a little bit more witty, and a little bit more sort of on the money. Whereas if the iambic's all over the place, then emotionally you're probably going to play it a bit more, what's happening here, and that kind of thing. So there's I think, certainly my sort of learning of how to learn Shakespeare was sort of, there's lots of clues in the script. Basically, and sort of to try and draw out as much as you can from the way it's written, not just the writing, but also the way it's been structured.
It kind of reminds me, well, I mean, not really, but how in modern day, like Star Wars and stuff, when they don't release the full script, production company doesn't, so they just give little snippets to the actors, don't they? And it's sort of just what you just told me reminds me of that now.
Yes, you don't get the wham bam ending literally until sort of, you know, you've been on set for 4 months and crawling around the desert of Tatooine, and then you don't know but you don't know how the thing ends. You don't know what the cliffhanger sort of ending is, and there is an element of that, I think.
Yeah, now it's very interesting what you just told us, like the combination of character and the way they speak on the text. And referring to your character, which you played in 12th Night.
Yes.
How did you, where did you see his language then?
Well, again, those sort of characters they're sort of more functional characters. They're not sort of fully fleshed out, you know, big, rounded, nuanced characters. They are designed to play a role and to serve a function for sort of the main characters to bounce off. So it kind of gives you a bit, in some ways, that gives you a bit more freedom in terms of the interpretation. And it's then sort of keeping an eye on, again, sort of looking at the line and go, okay, if it's a nice sort of evenly written line, you know, you need to sort of bounce along with that, because it's not a disjointed line. It's not one that's going to make you stop and think and pause. So it's kind of, certainly with somebody like Sir Andrew, who's, you know, very much a comedy, part of the comedy duet, with Sir Toby, and probably more so. I mean, Toby has his kind of serious moments, whereas Andrew's really just, you know, comedy. And you laugh at him, not with him. So, you know, he is a bit of an ass, but you know, that's quite fun, because you know, the sort of weight of expectation in a way is kind of taken away, and as long as, you know, you can get some response from your audience, you know, I mean, you can almost sort of play it for laughs, but you wouldn't go quite.
Yeah, but even watching you and George playing it looked like you guys had very much fun doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing with those kind of characters. Yeah. And you know, when we did the extract live, you know, and we were talking about doing a Laurel and Hardy routine, or sort of, and we did the, you know, the little piano bit was the Laurel and Hardy theme, because again, it kind of, you know, when you don't have the luxury of doing the whole play to introduce the characters to the audience, well, that's a really good sort of, you know, it's a real good tag, because most people know who Laurel and Hardy are, even if they don't know who Sir Andrew and Sir Toby are. But something like that can give an audience a very quick association, and they know what sort of thing is coming. If we played the Laurel and Hardy theme and then both come on sort of, you know, completely dressed in black with a really kind of somber and heavy, everybody be going, what, where, you know, so you sort of set up the expectation and then you play the expectation, you know, there's no subtext really. It's kind of, you know, give the audience what they want. And that's where that goes. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of, you know, the characters in Twelfth Night, there's some quite sort of, you know, high emotion kind of characters, so you need that, kind of comic relief just to let everybody decompress a little bit between scenes, or you know, after having had a quite intense scene, you need to kind of you know, and let that out. And so yeah, you know, they're great characters.
We had a moment in the show where, I mean, basically, I want to say thank you to you, because you jumped in last minute and you played the piano during our live show after our original piano player got COVID. So thank you for that. That was a lot of pressure for you. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about your background playing the piano, and how you were able to just jump in and do that so quickly, because that was great.
Yeah, and I suppose actually, again, in sort of the early days, you know, doing sort of fringe plays and stuff, especially when you've got, you know, a small number of cast covering everything. I've probably done, again, not for a little while, but certainly in my 20s, then I was certainly, there was probably at least 4 or 5 sort of plays that I did that I played piano on the side, because they just needed a little bit of interlude music, or they just had a scene which, you know, you wanted a little bit of atmos underneath. So again, it was nothing, nobody was expecting me to sort of crack out Rachmaninoff preludes or anything, but I suppose if you've got that facility, it's kind of quite nice just to add that in. So, and I did, again, sort of in between acting jobs, early on, I did a bit of depping, and I did play with some sort of R&B bands and stuff, and a bit of jazz and things. So I kind of kept that going. Obviously, I've moved certainly recently more onto the production and recording side in terms of sort of what my music, I suppose, background is doing. So yeah, I don't tend to play live anymore.
But it was amazing. It was really nice. It was
thank
beautiful.
you. Yeah, thank you. Again, in some ways, again, when it's that last minute, it kind of almost takes the pressure off, because as long as I can come up with something, it's going to be better than nothing.
Absolutely.
It was quite, whereas if you'd had, if the previous player had, oh, well, they were going to do this, this and this, and then, you sort of put some Rachmaninoff and Chopin and things in front of me, and I'd have gone, okay, give me a month's practice time and maybe I could pull that together. But
it was grace under pressure, so thank you. And I loved how when Matthew said, like, I need a tempest, to just sort of pull the tempest out of you out of your toolbox.
I suppose, again, because I did several years ago, I did a master's degree in composing for film and TV. So I've always, and obviously being an actor, you're in that world. So even when I sort of put my music hat on, I sort of have an understanding, and my interest in music is in, well, how does it work within, visual media, within, film and TV. And I've written I've done a few short films for people, and I've done soundtracks for those, and some corporate videos I've done sound for and things like that. So it's kind of, again, it's about creating an atmosphere very, very quickly. People aren't going to watch a film, and when you cut to the next scene, you don't get 2 or 3 minutes of creating an atmosphere with sound while the screen is, completely blank. You kind of have a few seconds to get a feeling or a vibe across. And then the scene starts, and all the other sound effects and whatever happen. But so it's a kind of, it's like, okay, what do I need? What's the idea? What works for this?
And then we were also so lucky that Kate could sing the Feste song, and she enjoyed singing that as well on the show. Yeah,
it works really great. And it sounds, she's got, she's really on pitch and everything. And it was, it was really, really well sung, again, for a sort of.
Before that, I didn't know that there was like this song, this melody linked to the play, and I did a bit of research to it, so it existed quite a long time ago, this melody.
I think it's interesting because obviously he uses song, again, especially in the comedies, quite often, and so we've had 400 years of these plays being produced, and it's interesting how some you kind of go, oh yeah, you listen and you go, oh, I recognize that's one of those Shakespeare songs, and then others you not so much, because they've always changed, or if somebody's needed to do a shorter version, the first thing that goes is that song in Act 4, because it doesn't really do anything, or whatever it is, because songs, again, in Shakespeare tend to be sort of commentary, they're sort of because it's a more static, if you like, all the action stops and somebody stands up and sings a song. So they sort of, again, serve a function to kind of, especially like with the Feste song, it ties everything up nicely at the end, and kind of the audience know when to applause. So it's it's good. Some really nice songs there.
And coming back to your character, was there like a line you enjoyed reading or enjoyed saying?
Oh gosh, that's interesting one.
Or just like
I
a
can't say
joke
there
which
was, to be
stick it. Okay, that's fine. Or which stick with you.
No,
Like something you have
not
to
really.
remember. No. Okay.
No. It's yeah, no, I don't
Fine.
really.
No, that's fine.
It's
Probably all of them, and probably the play back and forth with George.
yeah, I think again
I think
because
this was like
yeah, it's very much going back to, as I said, because they're sort of functional characters. It's more about the energy. It's more about the back and forth. It's more about the rapport that's built. Between the characters, and the words are just a vehicle in a way for that.
I was sorry that I didn't get to see your sing, because I was backstage doing my quick change when all of you guys were on stage, and I was like, I missed it. The other question I have for you is going back to when we first started talking about your career and how you sort of did a dual track with your degree. So you did acting and audio production. In today's world, how has that helped you? Because now obviously we're going a lot more online and audiobooks and everything. So
yeah, I mean, certainly with the audiobook market, because again, I remember doing a few sort of adverts, radio adverts and things, and you'd be, all trundling off to a little sort of Soho recording studio, and you do your bit. And I did some music for one, I remember ages ago, and you played and recorded that, and then you left, and the engineer dealt with all of it, and then that went back to the advertising, and and so there were all these very specific tasks that everybody did, which made, of course, the whole process incredibly expensive. And so it was only big companies that dealt with that. So now now I'm sort of not only can I record at home, because basically if you've got a laptop and a half decent microphone, and you don't record in the bathroom, you can get a reasonably good quality recording. And it is and so I not only do I can record myself, which is great, but also I can edit it and I can produce final product. And all the stuff, all the audiobooks I've done, certainly over the last couple of years, I've recorded, edited, sent it to the producer or the author, whoever's commissioned me, and then they just upload my files straight to Audible. There's no editing, or they'll listen through, and if I've got a word wrong or they want an intonation change or something, then that's a sort of, if you like, a sort of actor note. But in terms of the actual technical process of getting it from your studio onto Audible, I do the whole package.
That's
brilliant.
Which has been quite useful. And I've actually produced a few audiobooks for other actors who again aren't necessarily technical. And I think I think certainly with older actors sometimes it was always quite lovely sort of getting into a cab and going into Soho, doing your bit, and then you go down the pub. Now, of course, they have to have home studios and they have to be able to record it themselves. And it's like, it's a whole big thing that, unless you're kind of interested in that technical side, is a real pain. Because actors are actors. That's their job. They do that very, very well. And sort of messing around with all the technical stuff in a computer is a completely different job, really.
It's a completely different job.
Yeah.
I know a few actors who are in their wardrobe constantly recording these audiobooks, or they're like for an audition, they're under a blanket, in a hotel room trying to soundproof themselves. So
absolutely. And baking, absolutely.
Exactly, melting. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for everything you've done, everything you are doing, because you're still working on the play for us and helping us with the edits and the music.
That's cool.
So thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear the final product.
Me too. Thank you very much, Tim, for your time and all your efforts.